We get started.
Nika just joined as well.
Oh, Nika. Get that?
No problem.
All right, Mike, you're gonna getting too intense with the functions. You got to start the meeting. I'll take back over the reins. All right.
Sounds good. It's
Right.
7:04.
Only if I forget for a while, go on that, because we might be working against each other, like I said.
And
Yep.
when do you hit record?
All right. So Martha, Anika, Carl, myself, Scott, and John. Bob.
How's everybody doing? Staying cool?
Good. Bob Hayes, is that you?
That is
Hey,
me.
Bob. How's it going?
Okay, nice.
I didn't hear my name in the roll call.
We're just getting to it. So it's 7:05. We're running a little bit behind here, but we'll get the Conservation Commission meeting for June 24th moving. So just to set everybody up, so this is our fourth meeting, doing a Zoom call. I appreciate, for those of you that have been part of this before, it takes a little bit of a patience. We kind of pick it up as we go. But just to start, we're going to do a roll call with the commission. Chuck is going to go through some general ground rules associated with Zoom call and the COVID-19 status, and then we'll get into our first hearing. So I'll start by just doing a roll call for the members present. Just for the members, this is the order that we're going to make our votes in, so just keep that in mind when what order you're in or who you're after. So I'll start. I'm Mike Flynn, Conservation Chair. Nika?
Anika Scanlon, Vice Chair.
Bob?
Bob's muted.
Bob, yeah. Bob, try again now.
Bob Hayes.
Thank you. Martha?
Martha Moore. And when do we start recording this?
Well, we're going to start recording it as soon as we start the first hearing, because I don't think they need to record what I'm gonna the read that I do here.
Fair enough.
But thank you.
Martha, Scott, our newest full-time member.
Well, I think as of July 1st, I think is when my new term starts, I believe.
Okay.
But I'm here, Scott Keith.
John?
John Sullivan, member.
Carl?
Carl Sacconi, member.
And did we lose, David, you still there?
Yep. David Panett, present.
Is there anybody that I missed? All right. Chuck, do you want to go through the...
Going to do the shortened version tonight. Hello, everyone. It's Chuck Teroni, Reading's Conservation Administrator. Consistent with the governor's orders, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and allowing us to adhere to social distancing requirements during the COVID-19 crisis. The town of Reading, its Conservation Commission meeting is being held virtually via Zoom and Zoom meeting of the Conservation Commission. Applicants or their representatives and the public, when you enter the meeting, you are automatically muted and your video was disabled. During this meeting, myself or the chair of the Conservation Commission will unmute you. Members of the public, individually as needed. During the meeting, the commissioners, applicants, and representatives will be the only ones permitted to share videos. To ensure tonight's meeting is safe and effective, at this time. Yeah, so I'm trying to skip around, so it sounded kind of messed up, but let me get to the... All of the materials at this meeting are available on the Conservation Division page, and I recommend that the commission members and the public follow the agenda as posted on the Towns of Reading's website, unless otherwise noted. However, because this meeting is being recorded remotely, I advise applicants, in particular, the commission cannot discuss or consider documents that were not previously posted. Information, however, may be presented orally. Similarly, members of the public are encouraged to provide written public comments, but should understand that not all participants nor all conservation members will be able to see any written comments during this meeting. After the commission makes their remarks, and these have been addressed by the applicant, the chair or the administrator will afford the public as follows. The chair or the administrator will first ask the members of the public to wish to speak to identify themselves. Once the chair or the administrator has a list of the public comments, the chair will call each by name and afford them 4 minutes for any comment. The applicants may be requested to respond to the chair or the administrator. After the public comments, the chair or the conservation administrator will once again go down the list of commissioners, inviting each one to provide further comment, questions, or motions. Please hold on until your name is called. That's it.
All right, thank you, Chuck. And just to reiterate, because it's an important point, all of the documents on today's agenda are available on the Conservation Commission Division page under current projects. We encourage you to follow along there. In addition, the way that all the meetings are going to be held is the applicant will present to the commission, the commission will ask questions, and we'll open up for public comment. If there are, if you're part of the public and you feel like you haven't been able to get the public comment in, we encourage you to also, outside of this meeting, to reach out to the Conservation Division through the email site. You can always provide comments after the meeting for new items that are presented tonight. So with that, we'll get on to the first item on the agenda, which is 15B. Sorry, lost my agenda here. Which is 15B violation, the wetland, second act filling wetland area, DeRusso. So this is a project that I think most of the commission probably saw some emails on. I think many of you may have gotten out to see it when it was filled. But there was a request to do some light grading in an area and through some miscommunication, a significant portion of the wetland ended up getting filled. Since that time, Chuck, can you give us kind of a breakdown of what's happened? And today they were out there doing some work.
Sure. So in this picture, you can see the small garage just in the background of the picture, and a line of trees or right next to the driveway. So the driveway is going to be on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, there's a line of trees. In between those two lines of trees
Martha,
was.
go ahead. Chuck,
Recording yet?
Martha has her hand up, and I assume it's because we didn't start recording.
Right.
That's her
Thank you,
thing. Yeah. No, thank you,
Thank you,
Mark.
Martha.
Let me see. I'm going to start recording, and I'm going to go back to the share. Okay, there you go. So in between those two areas, there was existing lawn, and it was used as a yard that had, a net in it for volleyball, and it had soccer ball and stuff like that. So this area that we're looking directly down towards the garage was used, and it was maintained as lawn. And the violation occurred when all the vegetation was cut back and the topsoil was dropped in this area. So I had run into the homeowner who had let me know that in the area I talked about that was lawn, he was going to put down a couple of inches of topsoil just to even it out, and the project increased to what we're seeing now. It's been a couple of weeks. I've talked to the homeowner. He's extremely apologetic of what happened. He says that he didn't realize the environmental concerns, and he was, for what he knew about what's out there in the Timberneck Swamp, he was doing himself and his neighbors a benefit. So they've worked on this project. They worked on this project now for almost 8 hours, and I think that they've got to a point where, let's see, share. There you go. Where it looks like all the soil has been taken out. Well, it's the same picture, man. All the soil has been taken out, and they've dug some holes for the new plants, and they're going to pop them in. So at this point, I think that Leah Basbane, who's the wetland consultant that the homeowner found to help out during this project, and I think she coordinated this whole thing with me over the weekend and this morning, and she's done a great job. But if she can start doing the presentation, I can start working on these pictures so people see what's going on out there.
Thanks, Chuck. Yes, Leah Basbanes. I was hired by Derek DeRusso, and I've worked with him and Richard Coster, who's a heavy equipment operator. He does a lot of site work around. I've worked on him with other projects. So we put a plan together to remove the fill material that was put in. Unfortunately, it wasn't topsoil. It was primarily a loamy sand with some gravel and some, grapefruit-sized rocks in there. Scraped it all back to the middle tree line that Chuck was speaking about, which appeared to be pretty close to like the real transitional area of where the wetland would be. We removed the material down to where we started hitting the organic layer, and you can see that in some of the pictures a little bit. Some of it's a little scuffed up. You can see I'm pointing at the screen as if I can show you. Still getting used to this Zoom stuff. But all right. This picture shows, this is what started the entire thing, apparently. This is an area where there's an entrance in, and people were driving in and dumping leaves and branches for many, many, many years. And I believe Derek started removing that material. got it down to this elevation where it was level with the rest of that side yard that you saw in the other picture. He unfortunately then did bring in the fill and put about 6 inches or more, 6 to 8 inches of the soil in this and then flattened it out. So what you're seeing is the after picture. We removed that. We're not finished in this. We still need to bring some topsoil in before we put in the blueberry bushes so that they'll have a little nutrients and something to grab onto a little bit better. Once those are in, we'll seed it and mulch it with straw. You get another picture there, Chuck?
One with the erosion control?
Yeah, go to that one. So there was a fair amount of fill in there. There was a couple feet along that edge. It's hard to see what the slope is like in this picture, but you can see where the straw wattles are. That's the edge of the fill that was there. And we pulled out the material out. We took about 8 truckloads of topsoil out, not topsoil, but the fill material. Brought it back to the organic layer, seeded it with a conservation seed mix from New England Wetlands Plants Company out in Amherst, Mass, and then stabilized it with the straw mulch. The holes have been dug, so Chuck was concerned that the shrubs weren't going to get put in, but the shrubs have been ordered. They've been paid for. They're being picked up Friday up in Maine, just the wholesale nursery that I work with. And Derek happens to have a house up there right next door. So he's going to be bringing them in and put them in the ground. We dug the holes already, so it'll be easy for him to just plop them in. And so we can be assured that that step will be taken. I believe Friday, Rich Costa said that he would be able to bring the topsoil in to dress that area that was that sort of circle area of fill. And once that's done, it'll be raked out, seeded, and provided with a few plants in there as well. So basically went smoothly, I think. No surprises, really. This fill was clean, just sandy loam with some gravel mixed in. Wasn't too compacted, so it wasn't too bad to pull it out. And the soil underneath, it's just an area that I think that's really been beat up and filled and altered for many, many years. So it's wasn't compacted, but there was still some layers of leaves that looks as if they've been dumped in the past. And you can also see along there, there's a lot of branches and logs that have been placed. And apparently, Derek says that there's a power line that comes right down the end of the street, and frequently the utility company, anytime there were trees that were blowing over in this area, they would cut them up, and just became the habit of them dumping them in this area. So there are a lot of logs there that are not from him. You can tell by the age of them, they've been decomposing pretty significantly. There's also a lot of new trees that have blown over in the recent storms. You can see one in the background there in the back right corner. There's a big blowover of a maple tree. It's actually created a nice little pond habitat underneath it. So, you know, it's a natural thing. It didn't impact anybody's property, so that's going to stay where it is. There's another picture, I think, the long view. You can see there are several trees. Some of them have pink flagging on them that have been tagged, I guess, to be taken down. No, you're just catching it. The far left, that's one of them. But there are several trees. I don't know if I can show you a picture. I'm not the host, so I can't post anything else. But there are several trees that are all leaning. 3 of them are designated to be taken down. I'm not sure by who. Derek said he thought the town was going to take them down, but I don't know if that's the case. But they have been labeled to be removed. And then there's another clump just right in front of those, which the ones that are leaning on. They're not tagged, but I'm concerned that they're eventually going to blow over as well. So I guess that's something that, you know, Chuck, maybe you and I can discuss some other time about the future of those three, if they should all be coming down, and do you know who tagged them, or?
Yes, I do. I tagged them,
Okay.
and it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay,
They're actually on private property, but they're within, the resource area and the buffer zone.
okay.
Is Derek interested in removing those trees himself? Is that why we're going to have a talk about those?
No, I don't, I was curious why they weren't included in the ones to be taken down. I think he's indifferent. He just feels eventually they're gonna blow down anyway, so he was just curious. And I was curious as to why those are not part of the plan. They could certainly be left. I don't think it's gonna damage anyone's house or anything, but I was just curious. Anything else?
Yes.
There's really no request to take.
No, there hasn't been a decision from the town about those trees.
Okay, that's fine.
They're just identifying those trees.
Okay. Yeah, we're not requesting to do it. I was just curious more than anything. They are leaning, so but we're letting
Yeah, so this area was a lot.
nature take its course, so be it. But
Yeah, the vegetation in this area was a lot thicker than how you see it now. It was tough getting in there, and I had to climb back in from that row of trees. So
okay.
yeah, so some stuff had been obviously cut back.
Yeah.
It was quite, there was quite a lot of undergrowth there. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's where we were looking at.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find a picture of that. I don't know if at this point if anyone has any questions. No? All right, so this is what it originally looked like.
Oh wow.
This is the one. Yeah.
A lot of pepper bush growing in there.
So that was before the work. And then you can see the flags on those trees, and there's one just to the right.
Yep. Okay.
All right, so it looks like this work is proceeding. This work is under an enforcement order. It doesn't have any deadlines on it, but as I understand it, before our next meeting, the plants should be back here in Massachusetts from Maine, and they should be planted. And Leah is not only going to come back to, site some plants on site, but she's going to eval the site and the plants that were planted by Derek, and then report back to the commission. But she doesn't have to come to a meeting. She can just write something up. Even an email would be fine.
Okay.
And so we would have the material pulled back. We would have it planted, and at that point, the commission should probably go out there before the next meeting and make sure that they're satisfied. The only other thing that I ask is that a year from now, we have a survivability report on all of the shrubs and trees that were planted. Well, actually, the shrubs that were planted, but maybe the trees too that were involved in all this work, they may have been damaged enough, so they start to die. So I think that's where we are with this project. Looks like it took a long time to start, but they've only worked on it for one day, and it's come a long way. Mike?
Chuck, I just want to say, this is Anika Scanlon. I just wanted to say I'm happy to see the quick progress on this. It's a big difference from when I visited the site last month, I believe. So it looks dramatically different, and I like the direction it's headed. I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you.
I think at this point, if there's no other comments, I don't know if Carl has any comments. Maybe we should unmute everyone and see if there's any comments from the public. And if anyone could use your raise your hand function, we'll call on you. And Martha, as I understand it, that would be the
Sorry, Chuck, go ahead. I tried to unmute and that didn't work.
What are you trying? Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna stop the share and well, not unmute all, but I'm gonna ask Martha because I think she said it at the last meeting. Martha, to raise your hand, it's the 3 buttons at the top of the screen.
You can
Just
get through participants.
Yes.
And also, I think that's the best way, is through participants. You go to the inside the participants list, and then it's got a raise hand at the bottom and a mute and an invite on mine.
Anika?
I do want to add that I am unable to add a chat item.
Yep. We don't want you to chat, no, because it's a public meeting. So that's been disabled.
Okay.
So that's how it goes. All right, Mike, do you want to unmute everyone just to make sure? Do you want me to?
I just screwed it up and muted everyone, so if you know how to unmute everyone, go ahead.
Bear with us. Okay, I'm going to unmute everyone, and if someone has a question, just let us know verbally.
Where's your back button? The back button or?
The decision
Yeah,
would
right here.
codify what the applicant has and the board has agreed upon. Again, I don't have all of that detail. That's why I would ask Doug to
The Zoom.
present that detail to me.
I don't know who that is.
Conditions or proposed conditions. If someone believes that
Open.
the operation exceeds the
That was Nancy Finnegan. Sounds like she's listening to another meeting.
Okay, so I thought, let me just make sure. Okay, all right, so
I'm
that's
hearing
the-
no other comments, so I think we can move on at this point. You know, this is something that is open. They are going to come with it. This is still open. There's still work to be done. There's an opportunity, if you have comments from the public, to reach out to Chuck's contact information is on the Conservation Division page to provide comment there. Chuck, I think that's all I have.
just wanted to ask is the direction that has been laid out by Leah Basbane and myself is what the commission would like us to do. Just keep the enforcement order as is, and it seems like in the next 2 weeks this will be more or less resolved, except for a year from now we're going to get a survivability report, and the Mr. DeRusso would have to monitor the area for invasives that don't grow in.
Bob,
Yeah.
go ahead. You had a question?
No, I was like wondering why I was muted. Are you muting everybody or just the board?
No, you shouldn't be muted. If something,
You.
I have been, and I haven't been able to unmute, so it's almost like,
so do you know the raise your hand function?
obviously I just pushed it.
Okay, so do that when if that happens again.
All right.
Okay, so I guess I'll touch base with you, Chuck, at the end of next week, once the plants are in and we've got the rest of the topsoil in, seeded and mulched, and maybe I can meet with you or something, or you can swing by and just let me know if you're satisfied, or if not, then we will take care of what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you for
that it?
taking
I'll
care of this.
sign off.
Yep, all right.
All good?
All right.
Okay.
Yep, see you
Thank you
later.
very much,
Leah.
Thank
Leah.
you.
All right. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, 0 Haverhill Street. This is a continued public hearing for a notice of intent filed by Mark Hall, MG Hall Contracting, under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wedding Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1. This was the proposed construction of a single-family dwelling, deck, driveway, retaining wall, rooftop, including some variance at 0 Haverhill Street, map 29, lot 94 and 95, D2 file number 0728. The applicant is with us tonight. Chuck, did you see them?
Yeah, Maureen Harold. And let's just ask her who else is with her.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Maureen. Hey, Maureen. Is there anybody
Tonight,
else we should be unmuted?
no, it's just me.
All right, great. So, Maureen, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can give us an update as to what's happened since the last time the board heard this project.
Sure. So, at the last conservation meeting, Jack McQuilkin did the hearing. I had a scheduling conflict. And he gave me his notes. We revised the plan to address some of the issues that the commission had brought up, some of the concerns. One of the revisions was the infiltration trench around the proposed driveway. One of the commissioners had asked that get extended around the curve of the driveway. So that has been added and has been extended. The last proposal in front of you had called for a patio area. We have omitted the patio from the design. So, Chuck, the plan you have in front was the last plan.
So there's another plan out there?
Yes. So it's basically the same plan without the patio. We did add a 6-by-4 foot concrete pad at the egress at the rear of the dwelling. That's where the patio is shown. So essentially, behind the dwelling, it's going to be a walkout. So we wanted some concrete surface located there if possible. The commission requested a walkway from the driveway. That has been added to the plan. And in addition, the commission was concerned about some large trees that are located just within the 25-foot no disturb. So I had marked up a plan showing 6 large trees ranging in diameter of 11 inches to 32 inches that, obviously we would like to keep them, but we don't want to create a scenario where the homeowner comes back to the commission or that these trees are affected by the construction. So we did mark them on the plan as a potential to be removed. And if they are removed, they will be included in the tally for the tree removal.
Maureen, is that your phone?
I muted somebody else, Chuck.
Oh, okay. All right.
Chuck, this is what I have in my records.
Yes, that's the correct plan there. And a total of 17 trees are proposed to be removed from the buffer zone. There was some confusion as to the number of trees, but it's a total of 17 we're proposing, potentially 6 in the rear. However, we would like to keep them if possible. And I can open it up to the commission with any questions.
So, Maureen, the only thing that I recall from the last meeting, and remember asking, I don't know if you just addressed this now. So there was talk about the deck above and the concrete pad and whether they could be moved to the side at one point. And was that ever looked into?
So I took a look into that, and as you can see on the plan, the 35-foot extends around the right-hand corner of the dwelling. And we could possibly fit in a 14 by 10 deck from the front of the dwelling up to that 35-foot. And that's certainly a possibility. I spoke to my client about it. It's not a desirable possibility because this is Haverhill Street. It's a very busy roadway. My client would like to request the variance for the 10 by 16 deck in the rear. Our thought is that even if we put a deck, let's say on the right front corner of the house, it's likely the future homeowner will come back to the commission and want a patio in the back or something more private. So we're asking the commission to possibly consider this 10 by 16 deck. It is pervious. It'll be on sonotubes. It'll be really minimal disturbance in that area. In lieu of possibly considering that, we are proposing 12.8 acres of land that we would like to provide to the commission in some sort of deed restriction. And this piece of land is pretty dynamite because it connects with the Timber Neck Swamp, which is a large parcel of town-owned land in this area. So essentially our thought is that there's two ways you could go about this. One is a conservation restriction and the other is a deed restriction. We prefer a deed restriction because essentially we can have Attorney Crowley write something up that will deed it to the town, specifically to the Conservation Commission. We can have the commission review the verbiage. It's quick, it's easy, it's straight to the point. Conservation restriction essentially does the same thing, except that it's a longer process. I think it takes 8 to 9 months to actually get through the state. It's a lot more paperwork, but certainly if the commission prefers that route, we can do that. It's up to the commission.
I'll open this up to the group, but I mean, my take is generally we've done it as a conservation restriction. I'm trying to think of the project we did this on, Chuck, but what we had required is that at least the language of the restriction was provided to us in draft format as it was submitted, understanding that it goes through a review process, but didn't hold up the project until, but it was essentially as part of the closure that the restriction had to be in place at that point, right? Look, I can't remember which project this was.
It was on Arcadia Ave, and it really fell apart at the end. It was very hard to get we don't even have the conservation restriction in place on that site yet. And
okay,
I can't tell you that it was the owner's issue. It's still at town council to be reviewed. Waiting. I can tell you from November. for this to be reviewed. We're just sitting out there. So, Maureen, we haven't looked into deeded land. I would have to look into it. I couldn't recommend that to the commission unless we looked into it. And I thought also on the table was the land gift. Is that two possibilities?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, however the commission is comfortable with relaying this land to the town, we'll certainly go about that process. I don't have a preference. I mean, I just know conservation restriction takes a bit of time, so.
Mike, can you mute some people?
Yeah.
Chuck, I just want to jump in. Just a real preliminary search seems to show that a deed restriction is the only way it really differs from a conservation restriction is that there's a lot more stronger protections against dispute for a conservation restriction versus a deed restriction. So, in other words, one's a more solid agreement versus the other, which, to Maureen's point, is probably why it takes longer. It sounds more robust than a simple deed restriction, but we should explore that.
That's right. So, Maureen, did you hear that question about the land gift? Is that off the table?
No, that's not off the table. The intent is to give this land to the town. And my client's on board. Attorney Crowley will draft up whatever legal documentation is required. So we're in. Whatever the commission decides is the most appropriate documentation, we'll provide that.
Okay, so would you object to having all three options in the order of conditions, giving you some time to kind of sort through them and work through the town process and us to talk to, the supervisors and, see what the select board thinks while the house is being prepared and built and getting on with that?
Sure, that's not a problem.
Okay. I did want to talk about, well, actually, maybe more commissioners want to chime in.
Are there any other questions?
Right. So I don't see anyone. I don't see any hands. I just want to make sure Bob is not muted. There you go.
Has his hand. Go ahead, Bob.
Why I'm not able to unmute myself? Has everybody got the same problem?
It's so, Bob, these meetings often get they call it Zoom bombed. So we've built in protections, and that's one of them. And it's a little annoying, but that's true.
So it's not just me, it's everybody on the call.
It's everybody except for me and Mike, I've made Mike a co-host.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everyone.
I was wondering if there was a glitch or something between how I was logged in or...
No, sorry.
All right.
Do you have a question about...
No, I just didn't know. I was... Even when you said, does anybody got a question, I couldn't talk, so I thought there had to be an issue. I couldn't unmute, I should say.
Mike, you had that plan. Can you put that plan back up, the newest plan? And Maureen, what I was wondering is the reason why the commission asks for nothing to be in the back, because future encroachment happens. Even something as small as that walkout basement will lead into a patio in the future. They're already in the 35-foot. That area between the 35-foot and the 25-foot is okay for grass, but it makes it really tough on the commission to come back after the fact and say no to homeowners who just want to put a deck there. So the 10 by 16 needs a variance. The commission has to look at that. The concrete pad for the, that must be for the doorway, and the AC pad. So over at Randall Road, the homeowner there came up with an ingenious way to create a patio on the side of his deck. And with that, he just put in a retaining wall and he cut all that material away. He had his walkout there and it worked out real nice. And so maybe some more of those utilities can work, and maybe you can decide whether you want the patio or the deck.
Well, I spoke to my client regarding that because obviously the previous submittal had both. And we definitely heard the commission's concern that, you know, minimize. My client would like the deck if possible, if we can get it permitted, given the mitigation that we're going to provide the town. And it's just something to consider. I mean, if it's an issue, I'd like to know. I mean, if the commission would prefer a patio over a deck, we would do a patio. But I think given the fact that it's Haverhill Street, it's a very busy street, it's likely the homeowner will come back at some point to do either a deck or a patio. I think this eliminates the possibility because there's not much land there. We're willing to put, to allow the commission to put no additional structures back there into the order to remain in perpetuity. If that's something the commission would feel more comfortable with maybe allowing the deck or a patio.
So the deck's off the kitchen, right? And it's above the garage, the basement, right? So
Right.
the patio, how do both work? I don't understand that. One has to be at ground level and the other one's, off the kitchen on the first floor.
Right. So if the previous plan had shown both, so it's going to be a walkout where the concrete pad is. Mm-hmm. So we could, possibly put a patio or expand the concrete pad into a patio area.
I mean, I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission says. I know this project on Randall Road would work. The retaining wall, cutting 6 feet of soil, putting in a retaining wall will buffer that noise, and you could put some plantings in that area. You could also have the concrete pad on the side if you made those cuts. There can't be much difference between where it's coming out now and just around the corner to the right is the best way I can describe it. But again, let's see if that's sparked any comments.
So is there any, oh,
Sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
What would be underneath the deck, the proposed 10 by 16 deck? Is that just gravel underneath that? Or?
We could do gravel for some sort of infiltration for the rain through the deck. That's not a problem. If the commission didn't want gravel, we won't put gravel there. I think it'd just be pretty much exposed dirt.
Well, I don't think it's the comment I heard. I think it was, I'm not sure who it was, but I thought one of the commission said that they were worried about this being an attractive situation to start expanding back there. So not only is the deck there, then we're having the concrete pad in the back. The trees next to the deck, more trees could be saved if that deck wasn't, sticking 10 feet out. We would have an additional 10 feet of a buffer. A lot of those trees are going to have to come down, but we're going to be going through a lot of them out in the field. So that could help too.
Yeah, Maureen, so I see trees 31 and 19. Right now, the proposal is to keep those trees?
So with the submittal, with this plan, I had an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that I circled in red. So that 31 inch behind the driveway, to the left of that is a 32 inch. I circled that one. The 19 inch that you mentioned behind the proposed deck corner, I'm going to the right now. 18 inch.
So hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry. Is 31 the actual diameter, or is that just like an idea? It seems like it's just quantity just going up, right? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think
Right, that's just the ID. That's the ID. So that's a red oak, 14.5 inches. So I identified those as potential trees that may need to be cut given the construction to the house and the retaining wall.
So those are right now, with or without the deck, those would be identified to be removed?
Those are identified as potentials to be removed given the construction of the site. And I was hoping that it would be something that during construction, I mean, obviously, if we can save the trees, that's the intent. However, if it's going to, the tree is going to be damaged or, potentially overhang onto the house or the driveway, it makes more sense to remove it.
So we have an agreement with the applicant to hold off on how many trees are being cut and replaced because they want to look at that as the house develops. So the statement about not having the deck there and saving that 10 feet, not every tree that's marked out is going to come down. They're all going to be looked at once we understand where the house is going. So if it's deck's out 10 more feet, that's just going to add to that danger zone.
Well, and just to highlight, at the 25 foot, we are proposing a retaining wall, and we are proposing a fence on top of the retaining wall so that no disturb is clearly marked, clearly identified. We can add signage to that area as well, if the commission would like. The original proposal we came in, I don't know if the commission remembers, but we actually came in with 2 single-family dwellings, 2 driveways, decks, patios. We tried to significantly cut down this development to reduce as much impact as possible while providing the mitigation, which I think is a great mitigation for the town to connect it to the Timberneck Swamp. Again, we could put the deck out front. I scaled it off. I think it was a 10 by 14, but such a busy street. I think it's just more valuable to have something in the back, whether it's a deck or a patio, because if we don't, I think they'll come back to the commission.
But the point is, if it's not there, it's going to be tougher to get. We don't automatically give. If the door's not in the back and the patio the patio door from the kitchen is not in the back, the backyard becomes a whole different, area than how you've designed it here. I think, let me address one more thing. The CR, I get the CR, that's a lot, but that land to a builder is unusable. It is a benefit, and we were hoping that somehow you could design this to get 2 houses in. It didn't work out, but to get 1 house in this area, I mean, I feel that, you're lucky that you have that conservation restriction to be part of this mix, because you are on the 25 foot, you're within the 35 foot, the the variance requirements so that for a contractor, for someone who's not a homeowner, they have to have a public benefit. So there's no public benefit on this site without that conservation restriction. So that retaining wall wouldn't be there. And, you know, do we have to, you know, again, it's up to the commission, and I see two hands up.
Chuck, I think it's a good point. Anika has her hand up. Go ahead, Anika.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, I just want to make the point that, I mean, I'm looking at the submittal by Norse Environmental dated March 11 that listed out the numbers of trees, the DBH, and whether or not it was proposed to be replaced. And in this letter, it mentions that a total of 18 trees are proposed to be removed. And that the applicant is proposing to contribute $250 to the voluntary shade tree fund in lieu of tree replacement. 18 trees, I mean, you say 17 or even 15, you know, of that size, that's significant. If they have to come down for this to be built, then they have to come down, but I'd like to see more in terms of replanting or replacing with shrubs. And I think the minimum contribution by a resident or applicant is $250, but that's the minimum. That's the minimum recommended. So I'd like to see a little more there, or some combination of those two. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
May I address that concern?
Go ahead, Maureen.
So that was my goof, Anika. So I read the regulations wrong with the $250. So that was my mistake. Chuck cleared it up for me.
Okay.
We are going to plant on this lot. I mean, the intent isn't to just clear this lot and put no trees on it. The intent is, if we do get the approvals, construct the house and do a nice landscaping plan with native trees. Mark Hall does a great job in town. He does great planting plans. It's obviously not shown on this plan. I can show it on this plan. But it is the intent to put back as many trees as possible. And, you know, we do want to try and shade some of the area as well from Haverhill Street. So it's definitely in our benefit to revegetate this lot if we get the approvals for it.
Martha, did you have your hand up?
I did. I think Chuck addressed some of what I was wondering about, which is sort of how does the mitigation work when you're asking for building in the no structure zone. And I think, you know, the question is this property behind the mitigation that they're offering. I'm thinking about it in terms of setting precedent of letting people build decks right up to the 25-foot line. Most people who are trying to build don't have 12 acres to donate. So that was sort of the question, was how do the regulations deal with that? And then another much smaller question, now that the patio is just a concrete pad, it looks like you've got stairs going down to the grass and then like a 2 or 3 foot chunk of nothing and then the concrete pad. And I'm wondering whether that makes sense and people are going to want to fill in that gap with more concrete, possibly not coming to ask permission to do that, but just sort of pour a bag of cement back there or something.
Well, again, you know, I guess I'm asking the commission for something in the back of the house. If you don't feel comfortable with the deck, I'd like a patio. I'd like to provide the future homeowner with something. You know, I hear your concerns. What if somebody expands the pad, and what if there's a beautiful fire pit and an outdoor kitchen? I understand those concerns, but I feel like you could address those concerns with anybody coming in front of you, right? So you have the good faith of at least my client coming in, asking for this variance, stating that this is what we'd like to build, this is what we will build. He's a reliable builder in town. I don't know what any future homeowner can do. I mean, we could add signs on top of the retaining wall that says no additional work to be performed, no additional structures. We can make it as clear as possible to try and hit that point home.
Did you Maureen, it's Chuck. Did you look at moving that to the side and cutting all that material out of the way and putting in a retaining wall?
So let me.
And the only thing you keep saying is the back works better, and that's kind of like sound and privacy. But
right.
We solved the privacy by the retaining walls, like a 6-foot cut, and you could put a fence above the retaining wall, and you actually were the consultant on Randall Road. You know exactly what I'm talking about over there. It really came out nice, and it was on the side of the house. I think the homeowner recognized that the back was going to be unusable.
Well, I think oh, sorry.
No, sure, go ahead.
I think in the Randall Road situation, we're kind of comparing apples and oranges, right? Because you're right, it's similar in the sense of how tight the lot is and you're restricted. But Randall Road is very quiet, residential type area. Here we have Haverhill Street, where you have traffic, I don't know, 15 hours a day or 12 hours a day. This is a more ideal situation. You know, if the commission doesn't feel comfortable with the deck, would you consider a patio? And in lieu of allowing this work, we're going to provide the 12.8 acres of mitigation.
Well, you're getting
I think the mitigation is also, I mean, the house is within the no structure zone. Correct?
The driveway, the retaining wall.
The driveway, the retaining walls. There's a lot of work within the no structure zone, Maureen. That's
I
part of that
understand
mitigation.
But under your bylaws, the retaining wall is allowed because this won't have a footing. So how I interpret your bylaws is as long as there's not a footing, it's allowed. Same goes for the driveway. There's no footings for driveways.
So this is our bylaw, because we haven't called that on anyone else. So we are very strict. We use the dictionary for the definitions of structure. So anything would be a structure. And if it's in the 35 foot, it needs a variance. So I'll look at it now, but where does it say anything with a foundation?
So on page 12, under D, number 4, it says, no new foundations, including footings, frost walls, or other in-ground structures shall be permitted within 10 feet of the zone of natural vegetation.
Why is that?
Because you're afraid it would cause more damage to the roots.
No, I think it says in the 25 foot, it says an additional 10 feet can be, and I haven't found it yet, I'm just going off memory, an additional 10 feet for the protection of the trees that are in the
right.
25 foot, but that can be increased. So it's not always, the structure zone is not always, so if you're thinking about we are protecting roots, well, roots aren't only damaged by footings, they're damaged by anything that's on top of them.
The number
I don't-
5 says that the commission may grant a reduced setback distance of structures from the zone of natural vegetation. So the commission has the authority to approve it or disapprove it. And I guess,
So,
Yeah, but it
Maureen,
doesn't have anything to do with
because
footings.
I think we're going back and forth here. So I guess I'm going to, because I guess the question is, you know, that there is a mitigation being provided. From the standpoint of the commission, you know, what do we feel that it is the acreage that is to be deeded or restricted? You know, do we feel like that's? I mean, there's different levels of variance that could be asked here, either one with the deck or something in the back or something without it. And I guess the question to the commission that I'm going to just ask is, do we feel that mitigation is enough to allow something in the back? Or is it enough for what's being proposed just outside of the deck?
But there's more to it than just that, Mike. There's,
Go ahead.
it's not, it's can it work, and also you have to factor in, could it work somewhere else? I understand, you know, things can be moved on a site, and it's convenient to have it back there, but the sound, I think we've talked about the sound with just having the retaining wall and a fence, and the privacy is taken care of by that also. So it's more than just have we met a higher standard of mitigation.
That's fair. I think what you're pointing out, Chuck, is fair. There's what I see is that there's an alternative to the site. I think the applicant is very clearly said they disagree, that's not an area that we use, and I think we're just going back and forth. So I think.
Well, they didn't disagree
ultimately,
with any, you know, we didn't hear that, hey, the design of the house, that's the only spot for the kitchen. Or we didn't hear the design of the house, that's the only spot for the concrete pad. We just heard it's just a better spot for it. So I am pushing back on that a little bit too, Mike.
so may I ask something? Can I get a feel from the commission if you think that this is appropriate? Because obviously, if the commission doesn't feel that it's appropriate, I need to go back to my client, request a continuance, and see what he wants to come back with. If it is appropriate and I can get a majority of vote, I would love to close this meeting out tonight. If the commission is comfortable with that. But I mean, I can hear not everybody's comfortable with it, but if I can get a sense from the commission, that would be helpful.
Why don't we have a vote from the commission?
Yeah, so I don't think to this point we've had a vote on any sort of variance here. I guess that's. I think that's fine.
Designate what it is. I myself, I'm just identifying myself, David Panett. Think it makes a lot more sense to put any kind of patio or deck or concrete pad in the back of the house than the front to the side of the house, given the type of street that this house is on. And I also think that the 12.8 acres that are given mitigation is adequate to request this variance and the placement of a deck or concrete pad in the back of the house. That's my feeling. So, but I'm just one of many. So why don't we get a vote from the rest of the commission to see how the rest of the commission feels?
So is there I guess the question is that essentially a motion? I guess the question would the motion be is it acceptable to have a variance for a deck or patio in the back? Is that what we're looking to vote? Go ahead, Anika.
I just want to speak up and say, I'm kind of, I see Dave's point strongly, and I understand his point. And I'm kind of teeter-tottering because honestly, this house, if the Haverhill Street, and clearly it's not, I mean, I'm going to say this, so it's not my job to design the house. That said, if the Haverhill Street side of the building was slightly elongated on the Haverhill Street side, if there was a square foot bump out to the page north of the building, you could still stay out of that 35 foot, reconfigure the house, and in my opinion, a deck is preferred over a patio because you could have a deck and still maintain some level of vegetation below. You could still protect the vegetation with a couple of sonotubes and a deck. So this house could be reconfigured slightly. I mean, it's squeezed in there. It does encroach on the 35, the driveway more than the house.
So, Anika, I'm
But if
missing
the
what you're
house
saying
was
is
even
that I'm hearing
slightly
both sides of it.
reconfigured footprint-wise, it could get out of the 35, and maybe the builder's not has other reasons why he doesn't want to consider that. But Dave, I'm kind of on the fence. I could go your way too. I just want to ask the question.
Well, I think if you look at the front corner of that building, you couldn't go very much from the front corner of the building. You're not going to put it on the driveway side. So now you're looking at the other side.
Right, the north.
I don't see, on the north side, I don't see, I think when you extend that building out, now you're going to be encroaching on the 35-foot line again. So you're not going to be able to come out very far on that. You're going to be encroaching on.
Dave, they're in the 25 foot.
Right.
They're on the resource area.
Right. I understand that. On the
on the west side.
Dotted line,
They're on the 25 foot.
the dotted line is the 35-foot line, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that the one that's right near the 196, when you come out there, then they're going to have a problem with the 35-foot line. And I just ask everyone in the commission to ask themselves, if this was your house, and you were sitting somewhere outside your house.
This is not about building a house.
But Dave, this is about
Ready
the
wetlands protection bylaw.
Dave, not.
What's that?
This is about the protection of wetlands, not whether.
This is not a house building course.
No.
So can I say something?
Go ahead, Carl.
So, again, for the record, I understand, I get it, both sides. I also think this is unique where it is encroaching on the 25 and the 35 from what I've seen over the past 2 years. What about, Maureen, I believe you said 10 by 14 on the north side, and even if a corner of the deck on the north side was proposed on the north side, and a corner of it was in the 35, so fine. With some planting, some trees and things, I mean, you could easily screen the road. I mean, the deck 10 feet behind the house or 2 trees is not going to, in my opinion, you're going to hear the road. I mean, I hear the highway from my house, so it's not like you're, I just think that to me that looks like there's, there's room on the north side to do that if it's a concern to the commission. Or maybe there could be an option to see it or talk to the client on that. I mean, 10 by 14 is only 2 feet less, so.
Yeah, Carl, I would agree with what you just said. I mean, I think there's an aspect there that even if it were to maintain the same size, to be 10 by 16,
yeah,
and a corner were to go in, I'd be much more amenable to that than the entire thing in that 35 foot.
And like Chuck said too, I did go on the site visit. When was this? 4 months ago, or the winter. I guess would 10 feet of deck plus the pylons save a tree. I mean, again, that's in the resource area, which I understand. So it you know, that kind of bumps up the importance of that area. So it feels like something creative on the north side with a couple of trees and large arborvitaes. I mean, something. I mean, the deck's only up, what, 7 or 8 feet? I mean, it could be done. So.
But the other thing too is that if you put it on the north side, it's going to encroach on the 35-foot line, not actually be totally within the space between the 25 and the 35-foot line. So from a wetland protection standpoint, it's better to put it on the north side. But again, that's why they were asking for the variance. So, and we're, you know, what are we doing? Are we parsing the design of the house, or are we deciding on whether the 12.8 acres is mitigation enough to actually allow them to build something in the backyard? That really looks to me, that seems to be the salient point.
I'm just going to interject here for hopefully one more time. I don't think they've looked at that. I don't think they've looked at the north side of the house and put in a retaining wall and seen what it looked like. I think the grades forced them to put the AC and the concrete pad where they are. And if the grades were different, you could come out in the corner. I'm sure the basement is not finished, so any corner would work. But maybe if they looked at it, maybe it may work. And I mean, I don't remember seeing a plan where we had the deck on that side of the house.
No, I have not provided that plan, as Chuck stated. However, I do think that, you know, if the commission isn't going to approve something in the back, I have to go back to my client. But I do think that the future homeowners will put something back there. Whether it's a deck or a patio, they're likely to put something back there. At least at this stage in the game, the commission has the authority to regulate it and permit it.
I mean, Maureen, we would always have the ability to regulate and permit it.
But not if they do it on the weekend, and not if they do it illegally, and not if somebody doesn't see them. You know, I don't know. My thought is, I think this is a good design in front of the commission. We can add signage to the backyard, no additional structures. The commission will know exactly what's behind this house. That's just my thought on it.
All right. So I feel like we still haven't gotten a resolution here. And I wanna keep this moving. I think that Maureen's got at least a point from the standpoint of they need to give the applicant some guidance. We need to give the applicant, are we going to accept something in the back or are we not? My personal take is I'd like to see it on the north side. I'm not opposed to something crossing the line, the 35-foot line, based on some similar size to what the deck you're showing in the back, if it means we get it on the north side and that crossing is less. I think that's in light of all the mitigation that we're seeing, and that is just, I understand that there should be a deck here that is a better spot for it, and it's going to be more protective. But my take is not back there.
So I think that's right, Mike. I second your take.
Could I hear from the other commissioners? Whoever wants to talk.
This is Scott Keefe. I tend to agree with Mike in the fact of, this is, building right up to the 25-foot zone. So I'd like to see some other options explored and coming along on the north side potentially.
Bob? Bob Hayes?
Okay. As often is the case, I tend to side with Dave in terms of the encroachment or concern for the amount of whatever this net problem is. It seems insignificant compared to the overall gain of the project. I would certainly think allowing this to go forward would be fine.
Okay. Anika or Martha? Or John?
I'm just going to say I agree with Anika that I think when Maureen said, would we rather have a patio instead of the deck on the back, I think a deck is better, both from usability standpoint for the residents who are going to have a lot of mosquitoes out there. And the being up above protects the plants underneath better. I think putting a patio off the basement isn't going to be useful and is going to destroy a lot of the plants. And I'm on the fence. I don't know whether the mitigation of the 12 acres makes sense to allow the deck in the back. I just haven't been on the committee long enough to have a history of these things.
So I can, yeah, I'll just recognize one more site. So 112 Arcadia Ave, they gave a conservation restriction and they stayed outside of the 35-foot with everything. But it's a quiet street. I don't think this is more to ask. My point was saying, hey, we didn't see it, so how do you know it doesn't work? Maybe the design just can't be done, but the commission has the right to ask to see it.
Mr. Chairman, did we hear from everybody on the commission? What about John Sullivan?
I'm kind of in agreement with everybody else. I think I'd really like to see a plan with that deck on the north side. I just think that there's already a lot of building and structure in the 35-foot zone. I think adding another deck just kind of seems like a piling on with the building in the no structure zone.
Okay, so I think I have like close to a tie. Unfortunately. All right, let me do this. Let me continue the hearing. Let me go back to my client. Let me tell him what happened this evening and let me see what he says and what he wants to do. I mean, he may just walk from this lot anyway. He may say, you know what? Doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to buy it. Somebody,
Thank you, Maureen. These questions came up from the commission over a month ago, and they came up in several emails that I sent to you. And, you know, I think the commission, for mentioning them, they deserved at least a better look than just, you know, it's more private back there. So if any of those other things happen, that's fine. We don't have to keep talking about it.
No,
If
Chuck,
you want to continue, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about not looking at it. It's about, this is what my client would like to permit, and this is a house he believes he can sell. This is what he asked me to come in front of the commission with. It wasn't about not addressing the commission's concerns.
We'll find out what Mark wants, and if he'll look at getting the deck over on the north side and come back to us. It sounds like that's what you want to do.
Yes, please. So can I please continue for 2 weeks?
Okay, can I get a motion?
I make a motion to continue.
Second.
I heard Carl second.
Yep.
All right. Mike Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Sorry,
Bob.
it's my note.
Mike, did you ask anyone out? Did you ask for comments from maybe abutters out
Thank you,
there?
Chuck. Yeah.
Bob has his hand up again.
Bob, go ahead.
I can't, when you ask for comments back, I can't unmute myself, so that's all I can do. It's kind of annoying, but yeah, I'm for the motion.
Thank you.
Martha Moore in favor of continuing?
So before we finish the vote, hold on, I want to open up. If there's any comments from the public, could you please just raise your hand. Similar to that, like we've said in the past, that the documents are available on the website. If you can't feel like you haven't been had a chance to get your comment in, please feel free to email the commission so we can make sure it gets addressed. All right. I've heard from Anika, Martha, Bob, Dave.
Yes, continue.
Carl.
Continue.
And John.
Continue.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
You too. All
All right, so item number 3 is a simple vote.
Yeah. So 48 Pasture Road, this was a notice of intent filed by Joe Cordrillo. We didn't have anything additional from him at the last meeting. However, we decided to hold closure and issue until we had a chance to prepare some documents and give public some additional time to provide comment to Chuck. And Chuck, I'll just ask, you didn't receive any comments since the last
Not
meeting?
receive any comments, and I did hear from Jack Sullivan this afternoon. He said he was going to be on the call. So I'm not sure if I see him or not, but we are, if outside of comments, we are just looking for a motion to close and issue.
Anika Scanlon, I make a motion to close and issue the notice of intent.
One at a time, please.
Motion to
Carl.
close. Sorry.
Carl Saccone, second.
All right. Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Are we? Bob?
Mark.
Bob Hayes in favor. What do you know? It unmuted.
Martha Moore in favor.
Scott?
David.
I'm in favor.
Carl.
In favor?
And John.
John Sullivan in favor.
Great.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Anika Scanlon, I'd like to make a motion to issue the notice of intent for 48 Pasture Road.
David Panett, second that motion.
All right. Mike Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Bob Hayes in favor.
Martha Moore in favor.
David.
David Panett in favor.
Carl.
Carl Saccone in favor.
And John.
John Sullivan in favor.
Great. All right.
Great.
So, moving right along. So 0 Charles Street, Charles Lawn Cemetery. This is a continued request for determination that put by the DPW, filed by Chris Cole. This was some clearing of some trees in the Charles Lawn Cemetery, maintenance of work. So at the last meeting, just to give everybody kind of a brief catch-up and summary, we had agreed to do a site visit to locate areas where we would like plantings. There was also some confusion associated with what was the quantity of trees to be removed and what was and what wasn't. Just to give everybody a breakdown before I turn it over to Chris, Martha, Carl, Chuck, and myself did a site walk on last Tuesday. Chris Cole, Mike Hannaford, and Jen Kinsella were out there as well. We had already done a 2-hour site walk the last time we were out at the site, try to focus on understanding of what was to be taken down. The focus of this walk was on replacement rather than a review for the work that was going to be performed, and in particular finding space where gaps would occur, where light was getting let in based on the clearing that was occurring. We spent most of our time in Area 1 trying to identify the areas that were out there. What we did also see is that there were dead trees in the area that were part of the takedown that I believe it was, Chris, I don't know if you're bittersweet, or Chuck, maybe you were bittersweet was the invasive that had been choking this all out. And the main root cause of a lot of the clearing that was occurring, particularly on the Area 1. And so, with that, I guess, Chris, I'll turn it over to you to just kind of let us know what you've given as far as your potential solution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may for a minute, Chuck, Jane Kinsella, I don't know if she's on the phone or not. She tried to get into the Zoom meeting earlier, and it said the host removed her from the meeting, and she never could get back into it.
It was probably the co-host.
Okay.
I think it was the co-host accidentally.
It was definitely the co-host. Don't tell you.
Did she try to get back in?
Well, I see Jane's on the phone now, so I think she's on the meeting anyway, at least.
Is she on the phone?
Yeah, I think she's on the phone, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Jane.
So basically, I just supplied a memo with supplemental information that the commission was requesting from the site walk that we performed on June 16th. Mike Hannaford, the tree warden, went through and re-identified all of the trimming and the removals that he was proposing. He also identified the 8 locations, 6 of those along Area 1 and 2 along in Area 2 to plant new trees. And of those 8 locations, they will be planted amongst 5 varieties of species. And as you see in the memo, between sugar maple, red maple, Princeton elm, American tulip, and red oak. And then also as part of on the site walk, one of the commission members identified for Mike some vine over in Area 4, which she asked that Mike remove from one of the trees as well. So that's basically it.
Sure, and the only thing that I would add is that there was an area where a staging area for different types of soil was brought closer or further into the active part of the cemetery area.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at that, and the DPW department had put in some erosion control and some hay bales, and that actually worked really nice. There was no more erosion, and the herbaceous layer started towards the back, and we had let them know that it's grown up far enough so that they could remove those straw wattles if they did so choose.
So I guess I'll just start with the question. My take, what I'll offer to the commission is the quantity that is being proposed, and Carl, I more than welcome your opinion too, because I know you're out there and you know more about this than I do. I think part of the replacement, what I do see is I think the quantity still does not meet necessarily what we consider the one-to-one replacement. But I think what we've got is a proposal for trees that we've located spots that make sense, that could have some good long-term growth, to help reprieve. The other thing that I would add is, I think in doing this now a second time, I think what's added is that some of these removal, the leader removal, the removal of vines, part of this is going to extend the life of some of the existing trees that are out there. So I think Mike's got a plan of trying to extend some of the coverage that currently exists on the within the wetland. So, Carl, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what was proposed.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, so I agree we discussed that this was not a one-to-one, replacement, but with identifying leaders to be removed versus trees to be removed, that was lessened. You can see there were some areas being there that really were letting in, quite a bit of new sun, but I think that the 6 trees along Area 1 we talked about should really help fill in the gap. I think the one thing that I wanted to just clarify for the record was that in Area 1, the 6 trees were going to be a little bit of a smaller canopy, given I think something with the placement of the trees, the future plats of for the cemetery. I think we were okay with that. So there's something like a red maple, but then in Area 2, the 2 trees identified we discussed being a taller sort of shade or larger canopy tree. So I would prefer just seeing the list, something like the tulip or the oak would be more satisfactory if we have if we can. So that would be my take on those 2 trees in Area 2. So and otherwise, I think it was a productive meeting. Good to see good to see it in person. Understand that I think those trees will make a difference. So that was my thought.
Any other comments from the commission?
So I'd like to add one more thing if there's no comments. I'm not looking at who's raising their hands. Is anyone raising their hands?
No, I'll keep an eye on it, Chuck.
So I'm just going to draw on the screen where this area here, where I've just marked off, has been eliminated. So I guess the question is, Chris, will this area down here grow in? Because right now, this is where we have the staging area. I'm trying to mark it, but doing a bad job, but there you go.
Right, and Mike Hannaford had said that he's not going to do it now because of we're in the summer, but come the fall when the temperatures start to moderate, he will plant seed back there and get all that to regerminate.
So that's an area of mitigation along with the trees that was presented. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the commission, because that was they must have used that path back there to the staging area quite often for the operation of the cemetery, and that's been eliminated, and it's going to go back to natural. I think that's what I'm hearing, right, Chris?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Chuck, and I think that's also in line with what you were saying earlier. I mean, they took that out. They set up the Jersey barriers now on that outer area, which I think is creating good blockage. They did the erosion control, so I think overall that whole stretch is going to look a lot better and allow some future growth. Go ahead, Anika.
Hi, thanks. So I think this is my first time seeing this project in a meeting. Sorry I missed the last one. I'm still slightly confused. Do we have a good understanding or a good number of how many trees are getting trimmed, how many are getting cut, and how many replacements are planned? Do we have that count? Because every time I looked at an email or something, the numbers were changing. So do we have those numbers?
So when we went out there and we did walk this, so we spent 4 hours out there And and I think I even questioned it myself, but Mike told me what he saw. But apparently, on the street view or the Google Street View, a lot of the vegetation that you see is the Japanese knotweed that has the Oriental Bittlestreet that's grown up the trees and leafed out on completely leafless trees. So even when I went out there the first time, I didn't count that many in Area 1 stumps. You know, there were 10, 15 or so. The stumps in between the rocks, because that's a retaining wall. So that would damage the retaining wall. I didn't really pay attention to what was happening there, and I don't know if there were any large stumps in that area. Area 2 had far less, and they haven't cut Area 3 and 4 yet, or along the retaining wall that's along Charles Street, where it says Area 5.
Okay, I guess what I want to just comment on is that it's my hope for these cuttings, trimmings, and whatever gets planted, however it gets planted, to fill in those areas that, you know, I think especially because this is town land and this is a town project, that I don't think we need to, I'm just going to put this out there, I don't think we need to stick strictly to the tree replacement policy, just that we get the vegetation established in these areas that's a better quality than what's there now. I want to propose that can be an alternative, because I'm also aware that the town, you know, they don't have private funds to take these trees down and stuff like that, or to buy new trees. So I want to just foster these areas in being revegetated as best as possible with conservation interest, not necessarily the 1-for-1 tree policy or 2 shrubs per tree. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know what other people think.
Let me give you a number on the trees. I think we're talking 26 being proposed now, and it probably couldn't be any more than another, let's say at the worst it would be 26 that was cut down. We didn't know anything about it. So we're around 40, 50 trees at the end of the day altogether taken down out of this area.
I think what drives that quantity too is the area by the retaining wall, Area 5, which are growing into the retaining wall. I think it's something like 20. I don't have the inventory in front of me, so I don't want to quote a number, but it's around 20 just in that area that is, you know, crowding the retaining wall. And one of the things that I don't know whether it was ever listed on there, but you know, I think a lot of those were all similarly, they were smaller but being choked out by vine, but I don't have a great handle on that quantity. But what I will say, Anika, is that I completely agree with what you say. Like, I want something here that makes sense, you know, whether or not it's based on a number. I want a planting scheme there that works for the cemetery, that works for the wetland, that provides that protection that can be cleared. So I think based on the site walk, my take was that's what this is.
Yeah.
And what I would add, you know, I think in Area 3, you know, there was a zone that was open already. You know, I think having one of the leaders come down, we felt like, you know, maybe that's why there were going to be 2 trees proposed in that zone. But one of the areas was already filling. So the proposal is to fill something that was essentially open, and it's not going to be opened up further because there's something, a branch or a leader coming down. It's open, and so this planting was going to provide something better in that spot. So, I think what we've got is a proposal for planting that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike, I had my hand raised, but just
Go ahead, Carl.
I just didn't want to lose the moment. I disagree with what you're saying. I think that's right,
Sure.
Anika. We talked about that on site, and I think that we left in cards that this was a good plan, both for us, given the openings into the kind of wetland, and also what the cemetery was. We kind of met both sides, I think. So.
Right.
It looks like it's wide open out there, but we don't know where all the monuments are going. And when we discovered that, a lot of the open area was used up.
Yeah, most of the cemetery is already laid out for plots, so there were very limited areas for new plantings.
All right. Any comments from the commission?
Yeah, I have one comment. When we were walking the site, the obvious place to add more wetland species would be down the slope into the woods where the vines had been cut. But Mike pointed out that that whole area is really badly infested with bittersweet, and anything you plant down there is just going to get choked out with bittersweet. So it doesn't, I agree with Mike Hannaford that it doesn't make sense to try to have, say, blueberry bushes down on the slope, because they're not going to survive without a lot of tender love and care.
And that's right. Just add that, Martha, you're right. We talked about that as well, and that if anything, the sort of 3 or 5 foot buffer the cemetery has to plant right before the plats are designated, at least then they will be in the care of Mike and the grounds crew, right, to monitor those trees, cut, so they should have the best chance of surviving. And so.
All right. Anything else? All right. Let me open up if there's any comments from the public. Please raise your hand. I'm hearing none. Do I hear a motion? No motion.
So it's a motion to approve.
RDA.
Close 0 Charles Street.
Okay, so Carl Saccone makes a motion to close out. I don't have the right numbers.
Issue a negative determination.
There you go. Carl Saccone can second.
So I'll just do it for the minutes. So you would make a motion for 0 Charles Street, RDA 2020-3, and the motion would be to issue a determination of applicability, checking off N3. And just someone say.
Do I hear a second?
I don't have to repeat that, but just say something.
Like second?
No, you make that proposal, Carl. And then someone second it. Oh, guys.
Martha Moore, so moved.
All right.
Thank you, Martha. Do I hear a second then? Carl, you can second.
Second.
if you choose. So,
I choose.
all right. Michael Flynn in favor. Anika,
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Martha, go ahead. I'm asking Bob to unmute, but
Martha Moore in favor. Maybe Bob should not mute himself after he talks.
David, in favor?
that was David Panett in favor.
Yes.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
And doesn't seem like Bob's unmuting Chuck.
Yeah.
We'll probably have to do an abstain there.
No,
Or no vote. All right.
So I think that was enough.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you,
Chris.
Jane.
So Chuck, will you be sending me
Thanks for,
conditions?
Not sending you, but so the way request for determination works is that you can proceed at your own risk, and I think that's okay, given the CBA team. When I see you at some site walk or someone else from the DPW department, I will hand that to them.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll send you an email with more, more details tomorrow about how that handoff might work.
Okay.
Our responsibilities. Thanks, Chris.
We're good. Thank you.
all right. Next item on the agenda is 106 Colonial Drive. I believe, Chuck, this is continued.
Yeah, 106 Colonial Drive is continued.
Can I get a motion for continuance?
I make a motion to continue 106 Colonial Drive to the next meeting, which is, what's the date?
It's the July 8th. Wow, July 8th. I'm happy inside.
Can I get a second?
Second that motion. Martha Moore.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Go ahead, Martha.
Martha Moore in favor.
David Panett in favor.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
All right. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, 259, 267 Main Street. This is a continuance of a public hearing for notice of intent filed by J. Finnegan, Stonegate Construction Corporation under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, under the Reading Wetland Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1, for the proposed construction of a multi-unit apartment building, portions of which are within the 100-foot buffer zone and riverfront area. Compensatory mitigations proposed through wetland replication and restoration. This is 259, 267 Main Street, map 12, lots 39 and 40, DEP file number 2700727. Just like we said with all the projects, the project documents are available on the Conservation Division webpage if you'd like to follow along. And we will, after we have the applicant and our consultant, our third-party consultant speak, we'll open it up to questions from the commission, and then we'll open up to the questions from the public. If you feel like you didn't have an opportunity to get in, always feel free to provide comment to the Conservation Commission through email afterwards. All right. So I'll open it up to the applicant, Joe.
Sure.
You're
Joe, is everyone in your team on unmuted?
Right now, Chuck, I think it's just going to be me. I think we can
Okay.
need somebody if they really need to talk. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Joe Pesnola from Hancock Associates, representing Stonegate Construction. We've been hard at work with Ann Martin and Chuck, trying to work through the remaining issues. All the while looping in Pam Merrill from DEP, because it was critically important that we get her assent or her buy-in to various things that we're doing. I've got a little presentation. If Chuck could bring that up, I can run it through and try to simplify what we've done and where we are today. And I think you're going to find we're in a really good place from the standpoint of crossing the T's and dotting the I's and getting this together. So we did do I think 2 site visits over the period, and
1 second.
Yeah.
Everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Chuck, I'm seeing the folder, but not the actual presentation.
Okay, 1 second. Thank you. There you go.
Okay, so again, this is 259, 267 Main Street, 24 unit, now a 4-story building. So part of the the work that we're doing was to try to minimize the impacts and make sure that we were properly representing all the temporary impacts, all the restoration areas, all of the riverfront impacts. So next slide, we are basically summarizing the difference where we were on February 26th and today, the difference between the 3-story layout and the 4-story layout. And as you see, permanent wetland impacts went from 2750 down to 466. I'll explain exactly what the 466 is when we get to the plan, but essentially it's the finger-like projection, and it's the shadow impact from the boardwalk. Temporary impacts went from 2279 down to 350. Wetland replication did decrease, but again, we had a marked decrease in permanent wetland impacts. So, but we're still multiples of the impact, 466 versus 3025 in replication. Wetland restoration is just the 161 square feet that's associated with the installation of a retaining wall, that once we get the retaining wall in, we'll restore that immediately. So that's down from 2,090 to 161. The total 35-foot no disturb zone impacts went from 6,145 down to 4,922. And the 35-foot no disturb restoration, the area that was previously impacted, which was a huge driving force of trying to clean this site up. We have increased what we're doing out there by adding the lower right corner of the site closest to Main Street, which brought us up to 23,076 square feet. So we think we're in a really good place from the standpoint of really making some marked changes to bring this project to where we think the commission can approve it. Next slide, Chuck. So this is the area that the commission at the last meeting had asked that we entertain getting into and doing some additional 35-foot restoration. This is the southwest corner of the site, kind of on Main Street, where there once was a house. It's I believe it's the 259 lot or the 267 lot. I can't remember, but doesn't matter. It's an area that, you know, has some remnants of the old house and a fire pit and things like that that we'll get in there, and much like we were doing in the other areas, removal of invasive species, planting, addition of loam where we have to, and just making it a much more conducive area that's proximate to the main wetlands itself. Next slide. So one of the major changes is the addition of the boardwalk. We were kind of going back and forth with what this walking path wanted to be, needed to be. And on one of the site walks that we were out there, we kind of agreed that the path along the back, along the sewer was sufficiently taken down and would be sufficiently maintained through vegetation management by the sewer department. But the area between our site and the sewer easement was, it was felt strongly that, that needed a little bit more attention. So we've introduced a boardwalk there from just outside the wetland. We moved where it was to minimize how much wetland it was actually going to impact. We worked back and forth between Ann and Pam on first trying to claim that maybe it was an impact and light could get under it and around it and through it, and there would be no wetland impact. But there was there's a guidance document to putting boardwalks in salt marshes, and one of the criteria for doing that, in which you can claim that there's no impact, is to have a height to width ratio of 1 to 1. And Chuck felt strongly that this boardwalk needed to be 42 inches in that range. And if we went 42 inches high, we were going to railings along this, and it really wasn't what we were envisioning here as far as a wetland boardwalk. We wanted to keep it to no more than 30 inches so that we could avoid a handrail. That's a code issue, a fall protection issue in the building code. So what we proposed here is 29 inches high, 42 inches wide. There'll be Trex deck type 1x6 planks with a supporting structure under. The piers will be helical piles, probably on 10 and Chuck asked us to flare the end on the sewer side, so that's what you're seeing in that upper right hand corner, so that people could approach it from either the right or the left, and even mountain bikers could get up on it. So that's added, and it did increase our wetland impact from 207 square feet associated with the Finger Lake projection to 466. So it's just the 42 inches times about 82 feet that goes over the wetland. Now, again, the planks are going to be 3/4 inch spaced. The supporting structures, helical piles, it's very minimally impacting. We think there's light penetration, but where we don't meet that 1 to 1 width to height, we've got to claim all that's under it to be impacted, when it's really not going to be. There's not a big shrub layer there, and we think that the wetlands underneath there are going to continue to thrive. And the stewardship of the people that are going back there hopefully are keeping everything cleaned up and whatnot. Right now, that area in particular is kind of a mess from some of the trash that comes from the doggy daycare place, and just old stuff that's from the site that we've been talking about all this time, that has been not well maintained. So that's the boardwalk. Next slide. The next two issues were The plantings along the top of the bank, those have been kind of more detailed, and we have included within the temporary impacts 189 square feet of impact for each of the plantings that we're somewhat 78 or 80 plants that'll go along there. We've included that just in our tracking, and those are the first some of the first numbers that I gave you. The other thing that's shown on this is we had talked at the last hearing about committing to some bank stabilization, trying to keep that number underneath the 100 linear feet, which would invoke Army Corps jurisdiction. So we've got 95 linear feet of bank stabilization. We met out there with Chuck and Ann and found the most in need of work. And there's 4 areas delineated here, and they are, again, a total of 95 linear feet. So what we're proposing to do next slide, Chuck, is to use core logs and to basically fill in 3 of the 4 places the core logs will be used because there's physical undermining of the bank. So that'll be filled in, staked, and vegetated. And then there's one of the areas is just going to need blanketing. So that'll be, again, laid, staked, and vegetated to reinforce, give it that structural stability to be able to handle the stream velocities when they do get up, but also allow the vegetation and the root mass to get in there and become the future structure for the bank stabilization. So we've got some details on the subsequent slides with regards to the core logs and the blankets. So Chuck, if you could scroll through those. That's the core logs. And then the next slide is just the blankets. The last slide is just the kind of the main restoration plan. And what we've done to this is obviously identified all of the numbers that we're tracking, whether they be the 35-foot non-disturbed zone restoration, or the impacts, or the riverfront impacts, and we've put tables up in the right-hand corner to make sure that we tracked all that. So when hopefully you do an order conditions, it properly identifies all of those areas. And again, the main goal was to make sure that we crossed the T's and dotted the I's. And I think when you hear from Ann, I think we've got to a place that Ann can to agree with us that we're there. We're where we've wanted to be for a very long time, and I think we're finally there. So happy to answer any questions the commission may have, but we're certainly ready to move this along and hopefully look at drafting some conditions.
All right. Thanks, Joe. So before I open it to the rest of the commission, I am gonna, Ann, I think we've unmuted you. I know last time we had this, and Joe, I think you've gone through this pretty well in detail. There are a punch list of items that I think you've hit, but I guess Ann, you've done a great job, really digesting the details here, and working with Chuck and Joe at the DEP. I guess I'll turn it over to you. Do you have any additional comments? Do you feel like there's any additional outstanding items?
Oh, I think Joe did a great job going through the items that were open after the last public hearing. And as he mentioned, I've also been tracking with Pam Merrill along the way. And she concurred with my final last comments several days ago, and Joe turned those comments around. So I think the plans reflect a better project than it was when you guys asked us to get involved. I think it has significantly reduced impacts, but maintained or increased mitigation, and has answered all the questions that the department had or the concerns the department had that would cause them to intervene. So, not to belabor the process, I don't really have much to add, but I'm here to answer any questions if the commission members or the public have questions for me.
All right, thank you. So I'll turn it over to the commission. If there's anybody that has any questions, let me know.
Nika's raised.
Go ahead, Nika.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This has clearly come a long way. I don't have any comments about what's proposed right now and how we've gotten here. One of my questions, and I guess this is kind of a broader question for the commission and perhaps for Chuck as well, is it's my understanding so far that we're the first town board that you've been seeking approvals from at this point.
What I wanted to do is
So I have some concerns about preserving the gains we've made from a conservation standpoint, and I'm slightly concerned about challenges to those gains that might come up during other town meetings where other interests are at play.
Certainly. If I might, Mr. Chairman, I can address those. We are in process with CPDC. They've essentially said, we want you to get all your other ducks in a row and get all of your other approvals before we finally act. So we do have an issue that we have to bring before the Zoning Board of Appeals. When we went to 4 stories, we made the garage smaller, so we needed to put more spaces in the back. We have a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to continue the commercial use within the S15 district, which was parking. But the zoning board special permit, the decision included this specification that it was 12 parking spaces, and now we have 19 parking spaces. So we're going for an administrative modification to the special permit to change that number, and that's on July 1st. We have 2 options. We could put the additional spaces out back, or we could put them to the right-hand side, the lower right-hand side, where we talked about doing the 35-foot mitigation. Planning staff just didn't like that. We didn't like that. It would have been another curb cut on Main Street. It just didn't make sense. So from a planning standpoint, the additional parking makes sense. From a prior impact, it makes sense as far as a continuation of that prior impact. And from any detriment to the neighbors, we're mitigating that, and we have obviously plenty of room between us and the neighbors in the back, the buffer zone and the riverfront and so forth. So we feel we're in a very strong position to, on January 1st, go get our ZBA modification and then finish up with CPDC without any changes that we would have to then bring back around to you. We understand that that's a possibility, but given CPDC's desire to be the last one, I think we need to ask you to go first. And we're happy to let you all know if anything changes. And again, I don't believe anything's going to change. That we've worked so hard with your commission to get to.
Yeah, thank you for that. Chuck, one thing that used to happen when I was first on conservation was, and I don't know how this happens internally now, is the previous conservation administrator used to send just a brief memo to the other board or commission and say, just kind of outline in a couple of sentences, you know, we've gone through extensive review, and we've got, so what's coming over to you has been through, you know, this many meetings, this many, you know, reviews, and, you know, and if there's any significant issues remaining from your standpoint, like, you know, let's work on it. So I know things, I don't know exactly how things happen or how they're done, but I just want to make sure that, you know, it's as productive as possible moving forward. That's all.
Sure. Anika, help me out here. You said if there's any remaining things.
For other boards.
Right. But as I understand it, they're not at CPDC, and they're only need a variance. So I think one of the things that Reading does really well is talking amongst the boards and finding out, and we're always asking each other where you're at, how you're closing, what does it look like, send me the new material. So those things are probably from when Fran was here, maybe she was sending out the memo, but now everyone's sending out memos.
Okay.
So we don't want to be caught with that. So that that will happen. I was going to ask Joe if he had any communications with the zoning board, and do you know, or it sounds like the parking area may change. If they didn't approve it, that would be a change.
Just to let you know what we're going to do is zoning requires 1.5 parking spaces per. We think that that's going to be, given the product that we're putting out, we think that's too few parking spaces. So we've always desired to provide two spaces per. So the difference between 1.5 and 2.0 happens to be this delta parking that we lost in the garage. So if the ZBA were to say, no, you can't have any more than 12, then we will move forward with the project, risking the detriment to the potential marketing by only providing the 1.5 spaces per. So.
It's understandable that more parking would make sense for new homeowners. Okay, that was my one question. I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission's thoughts are.
Any other thoughts on the project or the changes we've seen? I'm not saying them. So, Chuck, I do have a question more in line with the order of conditions and what gets prepared here. And, you know, this is obviously a significant amount of work. We've had Ann involved throughout this process. Is the idea to have Ann help prepare an order for this that encompasses everything that's happened, everything that's changed, everything that's going on? I mean, this is, you know, we've done a lot here. You guys, the three of you have done a lot here, so.
Sure. That was part of our request when we put this out to bid, and Ann has been very helpful. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And for the parts and for the fact that Pam Merrill is so involved in this, of course, she's going to aid in the writing of the order of conditions to make sure we have everything in there that we need to. And is that true? I just don't want you to be whoa, surprised now.
No. I mean, no, I've been taking notes along the way, even in this hearing and other places in my file of things that we need to make sure that we cover when we put together the special conditions for the order conditions. So yes, that's correct.
So, so I appreciate Ann's help. I know that, and Joe's team were great. And I think this is the first time that I've ever been involved with a third-party review that was so complete. And one of the things that happened is I think they had proposed sonotubes for the boardwalk. And before I even started saying anything about it and got to that email, Ann had already told them that that's not going to fly and let's try something else. And Joe's been really great to work with, and we have those helical piles, and it's really been a pleasure. I'm so happy. I really feel like that we do have the best project that we possibly could for this area.
Good. All right. I mean, I don't have any other issues or any other questions. I think there is work, in line with what we've done. I don't think we can open it up to the public comment, but I guess from my standpoint, I think I don't see right now Joe walking away with any open items. I think what I would do is similar to what we've done with other projects the last couple meetings is, have it be continued, but give the guidance that Ann and Chuck, you guys start getting the order of conditions prepared, because I don't see that there's any outstanding items out there, as long as the commission's on the same page with that.
Let me just add, it does make sense, but I wanted to.
I can learn to understand.
So the way I interpret what's happening with CV19 is if the commission were to close tonight, we could have this closed, but wait a couple of meetings to get this order together. And we're not restricted in any way by the 21-day period. So if there's anyone, Joe or Ann, I think would probably be the only ones that would have any insight on that. I think that I would agree that it would be okay. Otherwise, I don't think it would work.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I might, it would go a long way in showing CPDC that we're done with the commission from the standpoint of the hearing process and making changes and providing additional information if the hearing was closed. And under the governor's current executive order, you really don't have a time frame held to the time frame to write the order. Again, we have a ZBA process on July 1st that we need to get a decision on. We have CPDC that we need to at least have one more hearing on, and they need to write their decision. So I think there's everything can come together in the same time frame. But I think it is critical that we ask the commission close the hearing so that we've got closure.
I think that makes sense. I'm not opposed to that, and I think to your point, Joe, I think even just from the standpoint beyond what we're talking about with memos and the communication, I think it's a good message to the CPDC that the commission likes how far this has come. If it's closed, if it goes closed, and they have less risk of impacts to all the work that we've done to help protect the wetlands and the resource areas, if that's the case. So I'm not opposed to that. I think that makes sense.
Thank you.
All right. So is there any, well, I guess what I'll do is I'll open it up to the public. If there's any comments from the public, just please raise your hand at this point. Chuck, I think you muted us.
Residents and businesses that.
All right, I don't see any, so with that, I guess the commission, there a member that'd like to make a motion. Come on, everyone. Oh, Anika, sorry.
I make a motion to close.
I second the motion to close.
All right.
Well, you guys beat me to it because I couldn't unmute. So I'll third the motion.
Mike, would you like me to run through the roll call so everyone, so it was more orderly?
Yeah, that'd be great, Chuck.
Sure.
Mike Flynn, 4.
Sure. First, Mike Flynn, yea or nay?
Anika Scanlon, in
Yay.
favor.
Oh, I'm going to call your name out and you're going to reply after that. David Panett, yay or nay? Is David Panett unmuted?
I'm looking. Nope.
He's sending his answer in Morse code.
Yes.
Yes. Robert Hayes.
Yay.
Carl Ciccone.
Yay.
Martha Moore.
Yay.
John Sullivan.
Yay.
Scott Keefe. This is, yeah. I think, Scott, you're associate, sorry.
One more meeting.
Did I get everyone?
I think so.
Sure. Can I have a motion? Yep. So that's it. And
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anne. It's been very helpful.
You're welcome.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Hope the rest of your meeting goes
all right.
well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Old new business. Chuck, I realize, so I think a couple of the things in here we can kind of cross off, but the Reading Public Library summer reading. I don't know what that is.
Let's end with that. Go through a few more and I'll get that ready.
Okay. So I'll start with Matera property parking area, Lops Pond parking area. And this is going to tie into the request to remove 11 trees at Bear Meadow with Poirier. So I'll start with the Matera cabin. When we went to do a site visit for the 11 trees in Bear Meadow, we actually had DPW Chris Cole come look at the areas where there's running at Matera cabin and Matera cabin parking area. We asked them to pull in so they could see how bad it was, and just asked them to see what just an immediate, like, what can you do to get this done, to get something in there, and then B, if we could make it part of some regular maintenance. Chris was totally open to getting it done and getting something together there. So hopefully we should see that there. I think, because this was a site visit and nothing was set in stone, I think from the standpoint of he was open to having some regular maintenance there, it seemed like, but I think it's going to be on us to make sure we keep that, we keep asking for it. So we should be able to get that taken care of. Chuck, I think did we do the hydrant at the last call? I think that was something we showed worked out well.
So the hydrant, yeah, so the hydrant was at the
Hydrant
last,
at Mill Street.
yeah, so I had that picture. They had taken care of the topsoil. Yeah, this is still on there because the Lobs Pond parking lot and the Matera, which you were just talking about, are going to be graded out, and the stones are going to be put back onto the drive, the parking area. And this can happen yearly as long as we make a phone call. That's what I heard from Chris Cole.
That was my take.
Assistant DPW director, and so that sounds good to me. So these won't be on old new business at the next meeting.
The request to remove 11 trees in Bear Meadow. At the last meeting, we came to agreement that myself and Chuck, well, really the group that was out at the Charles Lawn Cemetery, would go straight from Charles Lawn to the 11 trees at Bear Meadow, and we look to have Mike Hannaford provide some sort of recommendation associated with the trees. We went there last Tuesday. Mike was out there and looked at items, and then went back out, I think the following Thursday, to go through each tree and provide a write-up. I believe that was provided to the entire commission of what Mike's write-up was. Just to kind of give you guys a summary, I think we have listed here 11 trees. There were 2 trees that were located to the far portion of the lot that right away was taken off this evaluation. I don't think even Mike included that in his list. I think he went through 9 trees. And so the 9 trees are the trees we reviewed 1 through 9 at the last meeting, and he gave recommendations associated with work. Chuck, you've had some communication back and forth since then with Jamie and Mike. What's the current status?
So to break down Mike's list, there were 3 low-risk trees, and they were the maple, the oak, 2 maples and an oak. And all the pines were high-risk trees where action was required. Mike didn't actually make a definitive recommendation. We worked with a scale from 1 to 5, and you got that report. And all the pines ranked 4. And he gave an example. Gave an example of how to understand that ranking system. And tree 9, which was the completely dead one that had woodpecker holes in it, under this ranking system, which is more used mostly on the road. So that dead tree with the woodpecker holes in it would have been ranked a 5, which would be an emergency, and it need to come down. So with this ranking system, and the fact that you had given Mike and myself the ability to make a decision, everything ranked 4 was allowed to come down. And I wrote everyone, and everyone was Matt Cornelis, Jane Kinsella, Chris Cole, Mike Hannaford, and Mr. Poirier, that all the 5 pine trees could come down, and but we would put some conditions on the access and the cleanup after the access, and what was allowed to be left, and how it would look. So that part was worked on. So I guess Ralph understood that all those could come down, and that's 5 trees. I asked that the tree number 9, which in my opinion was in the middle of the woods, it wasn't a number 5. It was far less than that. I asked them to leave that up there, and I hope you all remember that one. It was in the middle of the woods. It was 10 feet tall. With wood, you know, it wasn't going to fall on anybody. There's no paths around it. So I asked them to leave that if it was safe enough to do so while the crews were out there. So that takes that one off the list. Mr. Poirier called me up that afternoon, and he wanted to know if the commission would consider the deciduous trees that were ranked 2 out of 5. And he said if the commission would allow him to take the 3 trees down, which 2 of them are right next to the stone wall, and one's a little bit further back. The 2 next to the stone wall do lean in. One of them was going to have a large leader removed. He said that he would plant 3 native trees that would grow full size in that area, and he wanted you to consider that. So that's new. Mike didn't even, the chair didn't even know about this, and we could discuss it now.
Sorry, thanks.
Not seeing any hands.
Yeah. I mean, I think we, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I would think if the system, from listening, I think we thought that those trees, you know, could be saved in the first place, and if now with the official system and Mike going back out there, there are 2, I would think that there's it's more beneficial to have that you know, mature tree there today than not. And so I don't know, I didn't see those as being a high risk. It sounds like they aren't a high risk. I think it's a pretty good deal to get those really tall pine trees out if that was his main concern. But I guess I would lean more towards keep the 3 trees than replace them. But no.
Are we talking about the 3 trees that were put along his stone wall, the 3 hardwoods?
Yeah.
I would have the opinion that, to be honest with you, that those 3 trees could be saved and they could be trimmed. And they could be trimmed in such a way that they wouldn't present a danger of falling over into his property. Some of the pine trees, though, I definitely thought should be taken down.
Mm-hmm.
If I can find these trees. I think this is it. All right. Let me see if I can get this.
I think what I'll add is I've become totally indifferent to that. I think when I first looked, I thought, well, those are the closest, but ultimately I think what Mike Hannaford has said, what I've heard from others, is that those are the healthiest and least likely. They've got the best root system. That trimming leaders is probably warranted and could help. And that I think I've also heard from multiple people that know this better than I do, that the pines coming down is probably going to help with those trees and the health of those hardwood trees, and they'll probably straighten out and have a nice, easy, straight ahead path versus what they've got right now. So I'm somewhat indifferent to what it is. I guess if we're doing the work, if the work is going to be done, it's almost, if there's a replacement plan now, I guess I wouldn't be totally opposed to having it, but I don't feel strongly either way.
Mike, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't really hear you.
Sorry, I guess my point was, I think if they're healthy and they're in good shape, I guess I wouldn't disagree with Carl or Dave. I feel like I've heard from a lot of people that they will thrive with once the pines are down, and they've got a better root structure. So I think if pruning and limbing is what's needed there, then we should do that, and I'm fine with.
Yeah. So do we need a okay.
Ika?
Yeah, thanks. I do acknowledge being out to that site. This particular resident has a fairly high level of anxiety regarding trees falling and hitting his house and hurting not only the house but the people. But I agree about the deciduous trees, and I think that the taking of those pines is going to change that area quite a bit. Those pines are pretty. Those are a substantial contribution of shade to that area. And I guess one of my questions was, are we going to keep some sort of stand on those pines?
What do you mean by stand?
You know, sometimes we keep like a 10-foot high stand.
Oh, you mean
You know,
like,
we top the tree at 10 feet above ground so that, you know, the woodpeckers do have a place to go.
You mean the snag?
Okay, snag.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought you were talking about cutting down everything. But yes, so what I asked for, and you guys can add in anything that I've missed. I've asked, so they're going to need to come through Bear Meadow. The crane, I'm not sure about, you know, whether it can reach over the house. Mike Hannaford said it could reach over the house, but I didn't talk to the operator. And Mr. Poirier said that it can't. So it's going to have to come up through Bear Meadow, a pre-activity meeting to find out if it can get through there, through the path, and to make sure that it's not going to cut down any additional trees to do this. So I asked that the trees that are cut are removed. There's a 10 to 15 foot snag left on each tree, and the trees that were cut down originally be removed. Any tire ruts are backbladed, and if it doesn't grow in, then to cast some seed out there. That's how I left it. And
There's no way that can get through the path on Bear Meadow, right?
I can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry. There's no way that can get through the path on Bear Meadow, right?
There's a path there now. That wasn't much better as far as you talking.
Sorry.
There is a path. There's two paths, and I'll let you know that Mike Hannaford has brought equipment up there, or on his own or someone else's, and that's worked out fine. And I think this will work out fine. The Bear Meadow, the meadow area, the ground is very soft and sandy, and it won't work there. I think this will work. My concern is just how big the machinery is, and to just make it around corners, would they have to cut down additional trees? And that would end up being a problem. The other thing that needs to be talked about is once you cut down a tree, and Dave Annette knows this, you have to process the wood. And they want to do that in the lower field of Bear Meadow. And I was told that that's where Mike Hannaford had done it before. I didn't verify that with Mike, but there is going to be a pre-activity meeting. We're going to walk over every aspect of how this is going to happen and be able to talk about how things are cleaned up after the fact. But Mare Tree is a good company, and they're the ones that cut down all the trees in the town forest, and they cut down the trees around town. So I think they have plenty of equipment to choose the right one to work on this project.
And in terms of replanting, have we talked about that?
Replanting is not going to be, so Mr. Poirier is footing the bill for all this. And there's no replanting required on his part.
Okay.
I would like to work on our tree policy in the future, give us options, and hopefully that's the near future. And I think that to get some, to have a fund in there where we could, you know, ask a professional to come in and evaluate the trees with us. You know, it would be easier. We don't need to do that now, but there may be occasions where that may happen or may need to happen, and then to do some replanting. So that's something I want to look at. It still would be the one-to-one replacement, and if we had to spend some of that money on an arborist, it would go towards, you know, the benefit of the tree and the benefit of the environment. So I don't think it's that far astray.
One of the other things you have to also take into consideration here is that once you take those large pines down and you cut the overstory from those large pines, there's a lot of saplings that are already existing under those large pines on the forest floor. So the success and growth that you're going to have after those large pines are cut down is going to be fairly considerable and very rapid once the sunlight is allowed to get down through the canopy into the forest floor.
Okay. Are there any other items?
So there's not a vote required on this, right? It's all taken care of?
We took care of it at the last meeting, but you could vote on the additional. I feel like at the last meeting you gave me and Mike permission to manage this, and this is more of an update. But the weigh-in on deciduous trees was important, so I don't believe a vote is needed.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with leaving the deciduous trees. One of them is so far away that only the top 5 feet comes close to the house, even that corner of the house. So you're talking small branches if it were to fall, and you were talking about trimming as needed.
Yes, so if those trees will stay, there is a trimming policy that would cut away some of those branches that are moving towards the house. And, you know, as soon as the pines aren't they're back, not filling in on that stuff. So, but again, the offer was that for those 3 trees to come down, he would plant it, you know, just out of our tree policy, 3 additional trees, 3-inch caliber and 15-foot tall.
Maybe this is my mic. Has Chuck's microphone?
No,
Yes.
Okay.
That's where we're at. I could hear all of that conversation.
We're close. There's a lot of echo, Chuck.
I wonder if he stops sharing his screen, whether we'll get better bandwidth.
only at my house. But I'll stop sharing. If we, yeah, so here we are.
You still sound terrible.
Chuck, is it possible the iPad's picking up the noise?
So my iPad is not, I didn't turn those functions on.
Okay. All right. So I think what we said, I don't think, as we've said, I don't think we need to vote here. I think as long as nobody has any issues, I think we can, go off of what we had from last meeting, and Chuck and I can kind of make the decisions unless anybody feels like they've got something in particular they want to get in there still. So. All right.
So the decision, just to be clear, what I heard was the trees are not coming down. The deciduous trees.
I don't know what you said.
The deciduous trees are to remain, right, Chuck? I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah. Mike, I don't know. Correct. So. This is good.
Is that the last item, Mike, or?
So I think that was the last item what Chuck, there's the Reading Public Library, but I mean.
What I read about that was that there's posters they want to put up to announce their summer reading program. That came out in an email from Chuck.
They do. I have this all there. They're just running around so much with the, yeah, there you go.
Chuck, it's hard to understand you.
Anika fell out of the meeting for a little bit.
I did.
So, yeah,
I did. I feel like I'm in a Doctor Who thing right now.
All right. Then.
Here we go. Everybody see that? So, I was contacted by library, and they want to use the kiosks at Fair Meadow to put up this flyer for their summer 2020. It's June 19th. And just email that readingpl.org.
Chuck, your mic is totally shot.
Summer reading. Here it says that. So you'll see these at all the entrances, Bear Meadow. And there's one next to the Wood-End Cemetery. And there's one across from 729 Maple Street. And 722. And of course, is at 1481 Main Street with Church Avenue. So if anyone is interested in the adult summer reading, please look at the flyers and enjoy it. That. So the next thing is the no dumping signs. Those are on order. Here they're going to, they're not in yet, but there's no dumping signs, and there's a no amount bike. It's a couple no bike signs included. At some point, probably this is over. Take another look at Perfectos and see if we can take the enforcement off at site. As I think it was Dave that said that that they don't have enough parking spots. So, the minutes, 5:13, I don't believe we got 6:10 yet, but 5:13, that was sent out to the commission. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes at 5:13?
Did we actually receive those?
It would have been like the last meeting, the 10th, so the 11th or 12th.
The last minutes I've seen were April 8th. Maybe I've missed it. Has anybody reviewed them?
I can email it to everyone and we can move that next meeting. So
Yeah. Why don't we push that to the next meeting, Chuck? All right.
So, I just wanted to know if everyone was available for the July 8th meeting, or we can have a quorum.
Yeah, I should be able to make that. I think I might have I'd hopefully be away during the week of the next one. 20 something. What's that? 20.
Next meeting in July.
So maybe the 22nd. I think I won't be able to meet that one, but.
It's just so close to the 4th. I was wondering if people were taking off that week.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you take off, you can zoom in.
Ah.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound, John Sullivan, you're available. David, Annette's muted.
I'm available.
And Scott Keith, you will be a full-time member at that point.
Yeah, I should be available. I should be there. Or in my house, attending, I should say.
We have enough. So Scott Keith is going to be a full-time member, and we're going to lose a member.
So Chuck, I can't hear you at least. So I think what you're getting at, so Bob Hayes I believe this is his last meeting.
Oh man.
Bob, still there. Bob's term is expiring after this one. Bob's been on the commission now 2 or 3 years. I don't even know if Bob, I asked him to tell me, I don't know if Bob's still there.
Somebody has to
He's
unmute.
muted. He's muted.
He's muted. You gotta unmute him.
I've tried to. Well, we thank Bob for his service. In line with that, we believe Scott will officially become a full member. He's currently an associate member, but as of the next meeting, he'll be a full member, to our understanding.
I should be able to, assuming I can get sworn in.
Yes.
I sent an email right before the meeting started asking how I should do that, so.
All right, and then the final thing on the agenda would just be next year's chair and vice chair and solutions for that. At this point, I guess what I would offer, let's starting with the chair. You know, I've been doing this for less than a full term. You know, when Becky left, I took over the spot. You know, I had reached out to Chuck a while back and said, you know, I certainly don't mind continuing on. But I certainly would open up to if there are people that are interested in getting involved and being committed and taking on that role. If there's somebody else that is looking to be nominated, open it up.
I'd like to nominate Mike Flynn to remain as chair.
Second.
Thank you, Dave. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I gotta say, why you muted me?
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you. All right.
You're unmuted, Chuck. Try one more time.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
No.
Chuck, you'll have to
Your
watch
microphone
on
is just
TV and see what you sound like.
Yeah. All right. As for vice chair, I know Anika had stepped in to when I moved up to take on that role because she had the experience. I think it'd be nice to get some new involvement, but I'll leave that. I mean, I've talked with Anika a little bit about this. Anika's been part of I think I was looking at something not that long ago. Anika's been on the commission since 2005. She's been chair and vice chair and vice chair over again. She's a great help, and I don't know if she'd be open to continue if there isn't anybody that can step into it. But I think it'd be nice to get some new involvement, and somebody that could take on that vice chair role and kind of use that as an opportunity to understand the process a little bit better. So.
Yeah, so I'll just chime in with what Mike said. If there's any other members who have any interest in devoting additional time every week to conservation. Carl, are you okay?
Is there?
Yeah.
Was that your answer, Carl?
So I'm unmuted now.
Yes. Can you guys hear me now or not?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Sounds like a phone
You
ad.
sound a lot better.
And Bob, I can hear you again.
Bob, we can hear you as well.
I can't hear Mike though. Crazy.
Are we all here?
We're all here.
You can't hear me, Chuck?
Muted now.
It just sounds low.
Folks, I know I have to bail off to do other things here. I'm sorry, I've been less than attentive the last half hour or so. But anyway, it's been a wonderful.
Said goodbye, Bob.
Well, I know I got to say it anyway, but it's been a wonderful 3 years of my life.
But in actual time, how long was it really?
Well, you know what time dilation is. Are you familiar with Einstein's theory of relativity? I haven't aged much, but I'm sure you guys have aged a lot.
Well, I know you drove down from New Hampshire once so we could have a quorum, so that was well worth it. That was well worth it.
And there aren't many swords I would jump on in life, but I thought this was appropriate. But I would like to send a formal email, which I wanted to wait till after tonight's meeting, to everybody, just explaining that I've enjoyed this much more than I thought I would, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic or demeaning when I say that. You guys all do a great job. You do good work. It's important, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that my apparent cavalierness or maybe just ambivalence was in any way a criticism of what you do. It's not to be construed that way at all. That's not my intent, and I've really enjoyed meeting you guys and having some fun and hopefully participating and getting some good stuff accomplished.
Bob, I wanted to ask, how come Are you involved in the Bear Meadow master plan? Is that something that, or are you not doing softball?
Well, you're talking about revision number 438 that's been going back and forth for 20 years? Yes, I am, actually.
Okay, I just didn't see you at the last meeting.
No, I may have not been at that meeting, but we have contributed numerous times to the town to tell them what we thought they should do down there, just for as an information thing. But no, I have no real involvement in the process other than just being a citizen of Reading.
All right, I'll keep you in touch. I'll about that and anything else that I'm sure those. Hopefully that's okay. Keep in touch.
Be great. Love it.
All right, Bob. Well,
So I'm going to sign off. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Go, passing the torch.
Chuck, can you check if Mike is trying to get back in? He disappeared.
No, I would see that. I don't see him. He sent me a text saying that his computer died and he is trying to get back on. So it might just take a minute. I'm going to unmute Dave Net again. Oh, I'm so glad that everyone hears me. All the important information I was telling Maureen, I was hoping she heard that.
Oh, you were fine until really close to the end,
Yeah, it was just 10 minutes ago.
when we started telling you we couldn't hear you. Before then, it was fine.
Mike, yeah. So Mike's back.
So I'm going to bring this back up again. Is anybody else interested in being vice chair?
I'm not.
At this point,
You are, Scott?
No, I'm not.
I saw your hand go up too. I was like, wow.
I just figured I'd chime in and give you an answer.
yeah, I would just as happily let you be vice chair again, Anika. Can I nominate you for that?
You're going to have to want it. You can't just let it happen. You're going to have to actually vote for it.
Okay, I
Yeah,
nominate you. Would you accept the nomination?
I would, but I also have been in, I just want to share that I've been in the position of being a newer member and intimidated to jump into a role like this. And I just want to encourage anybody else who thinks they have extra time and wants to work closer with Chuck and Mike to consider it. And don't think that just because you're newer to the commission that you can't do it.
Sorry.
It would definitely help you learn what's going on quicker because you would be forced into understanding the
We've been
regulations.
vote before my own computer dies. Because this has now been like 3 times I've been kicked out.
Mike, anything to say? Anika's reluctant to be vice chair from what I'm hearing.
I'm happy to be vice chair. I'll say it. I'm happy to be vice chair. I work with the best people. We just lost a good one, but I work with the best people.
Yeah, I think it'd be good if somebody is willing to step up and do the vice chair. Yeah.
I think the one thing that I would
got
add.
lost or just disconnected.
So this is what I think that we're looking for. Mike is busy, and I get him when I can, and he's really great. But it would be great to have somebody who could fill in when Mike can't, because I'm not allowed to make all the decisions, but the chair and the vice chair, or the chair and a co-chair, could give me more direction and things could roll a little bit easier. Now, Mike's been great, but he always tells me like these stories about how he doesn't check his phone. I've come to believe that he just doesn't want to. That's where it's at. He's got 5 minutes today. I've used it. There's no way I'm getting a second 5. So if you know, if I had to say anything, it's more about filling in that other half of what Mike is not able to do, and that would be important. And I know Anika's been there a long time, and I think she was saying that too. Hey, anybody look if they can do it. You know, this is not just a ceremonial position. You know, I need, and Mike needs just someone who can be around and be involved. So with that, did that probably scared the rest of them off, Mike? I don't know. You want to try to?
You're supposed to tell them how easy it is, Chuck.
Yeah.
It's
super
Mike
easy.
is always around. And,
Vice chair
and therefore,
the vice chair gets to, you know, the Christmas party or the holiday parties, and
it's basically like Veep.
All our future parties are going to look exactly like this.
Yeah, this can't last forever. This has to stop at some point. But okay, with that, I don't see anyone. Do you want to ask them one at a time, Mike, and see if that pushes them over the edge?
Well, understanding that Scott isn't even a full member yet, Dave or Carl, I mean, I think you guys have been on the commission longer than anybody else. I mean, is this something that either you could feel like you could take on?
I mean, I think it's a natural progression. I've been part of committees before. I'm just very realistic, and I just, you know, I mean, everyone has excuses. I mean, I just feel like with my job, it's just hard for me to get back to these meetings. The commitment's just a lot. So I feel like I try to make it very good effort when Chuck calls me personally and says, can you please come to this, you know, this meeting? And I try to make time for those things. But I mean, I think my immediate goal is to just keep trying to do that and see if I can eventually get a little bit more free time and do the lunch meetings, or if anyone wants to meet at 6 a.m., I could do that. But it's just difficult. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. So, but I mean, I think if I like being a part of this, and I think it's going to be something natural that just get my head around a little bit more and see if I can keep up with Chuck and you guys, and then maybe it's something that could fall into. But as of a decision right now at 10:15, I'd say I just don't know if I can commit to it. But it's my honest opinion.
And Dave, I don't know if you're still there. I know you're on mute, but I just figured you've been on the commission a full while as well. Don't unmute. You don't have to answer.
I think Dave is giving his answer there.
Yeah. All right. So, Anika, I mean.
Well, maybe it's just you, Mike. Maybe after that, Anika's like, well, you know what?
I just keep going to non-video because it's better for my signal. That's all. I'm happy to wrap up this meeting. So
Yeah.
I nominate Michael Flynn as chair. Is there anyone second? Anyone?
Oh, second.
We already voted for him as chair.
Yeah.
We already voted. Oh, so I missed that on one of my exits. So,
Yeah.
okay, so now I'm going to nominate myself as vice chair.
I second that.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
In favor. Carl Ciccone in favor.
All right.
Thank you, Anika, for.
Thank you.
Yeah, Anika, thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to step up a little bit more, Chuck.
Side note, thank you, because I do see how much there is to do the more I'm involved. So thank you. I appreciate it.
the load gets shared, and
Hmm.
it's, yeah, there's always something, isn't there, Chuck? There's always something to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pushing. I think it's very helpful to have availability, which is, which is good. And
Look, I think just to add, I think one of the COVID, at least for me, I know has put a unique aspect onto all of this, because it's been more difficult. I think Chuck and I felt like we had some momentum on a couple items, and then all of a sudden this COVID happened, and it was like, A, we're not around, and B, it's just difficult to meet with, whether it's, can you do a site visit, can you meet with this group of people? So I think that in general, COVID has put a unique spin on this as well.
Are either of the other associate members continuing on?
I think they had more than 1 year terms. I think you were the only one that had a 1 year term.
yeah,
I had a 1 year term also.
Yeah, and I think, did you receive confirmation that you were re-upped? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so Nicola had sent me an email this morning saying that she had a work commitment for tonight, and I haven't heard from Tay. That's all. Yeah.
All right. I've lost my agenda because my computer shut down when that happened. Are there any other items, Chuck?
I'm looking right now. No, there's
I think I said, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
I
Thank you, everyone.
That's
Aye.
great.